All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Bean Museum's Facebook page. We are very excited today to do some life science live. So we're going to be talking about some life science topics each Monday and Friday as we can. My name is Marin. You can see right there. It's backwards, but my name is still Marin, and I'm going to be your host today. We're going to be talking about moths and butterflies, which is why I'm right here looking like a butterfly right here in front of our butterfly mural. So we are going to be talking about a few different things with moths and butterflies, all right? We're going to be talking about things that are the same between them and things that are different, and that's where we're going to start. So if you can think of anything that's the same or different between a moth and a butterfly, go ahead and comment those down below. Let's see what you already know about these insects, okay? So we're going to start by talking about things that are the same between them. So some things that are the same is that they are both, like I said, insects. Now you can tell that something is an insect by a couple of different features. If you guys think of any, you can go ahead and comment them down below. Like I said, I'm going to grab an insect to show you. I've got one right here. So we're going to look really, really close at this, and we're going to be able to see that there are certain things that this insect has that moths and butterflies also have, both of them. So, first things first, they have 6 legs, and that's true for all insects. So let's take a look, let's count up his legs. We've got, they're kind of hard to see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's all 6 of his legs. This insect right here is not a moth or a butterfly. It is what's called a Tarantula Hawk. It's a type of wasp that eats tarantulas. Pretty neat. Now there's another thing about insects that is really easy to tell is that they have 3 body segments. Okay, so some of them are easier to tell than others, but we can see right here, we've got 1, 2, 3. So these 3 parts are called the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Now all 3 of those parts are going to be on both moths and butterflies as well as all other insects. So let's take a look at some other things. Let's see if these are insects. I have here a scorpion. What do you guys think? Is this scorpion an insect? Only one way to find out. Let's check, let's count his legs. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 legs, plus these claws right here, his front claws, those aren't actually legs, those are arms. So he has 6 legs, or sorry, he has 8 legs and 2 arms. So does that mean he's an insect? No, he's not an insect. He's what's called an arachnid. Now these are the same. Scorpions and spiders are both arachnids, and you can tell that they're arachnids because they have 8 legs and 2 body segments. How many does an insect have? Insect has 3 body segments, and an arachnid has 2. So you can see right here, this whole front part right here, that is his cephalothorax. That means it's his head and his thorax, the middle part, all combined together. And this whole part here, his tail, is his abdomen. All right, let's take a look at one more. Let's see if this is an insect. So I have here a giant millipede. What do you guys think? Is this an insect? Only one way to find out. Let's start by counting his legs. All right, here we go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's a lot more than 6 legs, guys, because this guy right here, you can see his legs go all the way around. So all those little fuzzy looking bits, those are all legs. Now what about body segments? What does it look like he has body segment wise? Oh man, he's got a lot of those too. He is not an insect. All right, so we've looked at a few things, some insects and some non-insects. So let's remember, moths and butterflies are insects, which means that they have how many legs, guys? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legs, and how many body segments? 1, 2, 3 body segments, okay? So that's something that is the same between a moth and a butterfly. They both have 6 legs and 3 body segments. Now, there's a couple other things that moths and butterflies have that are the same between them, beyond other things that other insects have. So, one of those things, let me show you some more stuff. We have, let me see if I can get, I think this one should be able to show you. Now, moths and butterflies come in lots of different colors. As you can see right here, there's so many different colors. And we have all of those colors are made by little tiny scales on their wings. So I'm going to bring them in real nice and close so you can see. Do you see how this dark part right here looks kind of peppery? Kind of like it's spray painted on? That's kind of how you can see the individual scales of these insects. So they have little tiny scales all over. And so you can see that's what makes their colors. And yeah, I was hoping to look like a butterfly right here with my little antenna and my wings. So you can see that's how they have their different colorations. Now that's true of moths and butterflies, and for the most part, it comes from something called pigment. And that's pretty much just when you put a certain color into it, it looks like that color. So the really dark spots are because of really dark pigments. The same way that our hair can be really dark or really light is because it has different pigments in it. But there is another way for butterflies and moths to be colored. I have some really beautiful ones right here. Do you see how, especially these blue ones here and here, how when I shift this up and down, the colors shift and are kind of shiny and sparkly? You can see it in the green here on this. These are called blue Morpho butterflies right here, or you can really see it like that. See how shiny that is? That is not because of a pigment. It's actually because of the structure of the scales. So instead of just the scales right here are blue, and that's why they look like that, it's actually the way that they lay down and the way that the light reflects off of them that makes them shiny and blue like that. So any animals that you see in the wild with iridescent colors like this that shift with the light, you can see it in insects and butterflies. You can see it sometimes in birds on feathers. Those are really cool. And they can shift just like that. Now we have a question from Emily that says, are butterflies related to snakes since they both have scales? That's a really good question, and not exactly. That's something that is called Convergent Evolution. Now that's kind of a big term, but it basically means that sometimes things evolve multiple times in lots of different species. So it's the same way that we can see that fish have scales, and they're not related any closer to a reptile than anything else. So, you know, they're really related way far back, but they're not super related, even they both have scales. Or if you look at, say, a fish or a shark and a whale. A whale is a mammal, even though it has a tail and it lives in the water, and a fish and a shark also have a tail that they use to swim and to propel through the water, but they're totally not related, not very close. So that's kind of, it seems like they could be related because they both have scales, but they're different kinds of scales and they evolved at different times. So great question. Thank you guys so much for that. Now we're going to talk some more about things that are the same between some moths and butterflies. And if you have anything that you want to say that is, if you have anything that's the same or different between the two that you can think of, remember you can comment those down below, or any questions that you have. So, one other thing that's the same between moths and butterflies is something called metamorphosis. You guys heard that term before, metamorphosis? It happens with a couple of different animals. So we see it with insects, and we also see it with things like amphibians. Basically what it means is they start out as a teeny tiny little egg, and then they hatch into a caterpillar. This is just for moths and butterflies. It's similar stages, but different terms, like a tadpole for amphibians. But we have, for moths and butterflies, we have a caterpillar that you'll see, okay, little tiny squishy guys. And then they will turn into a chrysalis, or a cocoon, where they have a really hard shell, and that's when they go through metamorphosis. So, how it works is that a butterfly comes out of the shell, right? Caterpillar goes in, butterfly comes out. Basically what happens is that the caterpillar wraps himself up in this protective layer. He turns himself into a little tiny shell, and then his body liquefies. He just turns into caterpillar bug juice. And all of his cells, all the things that make up his body, rearrange themselves and rebuild themselves into the structures that form a butterfly, just like these guys right here. So, when we think about a caterpillar, there's even some differences between a caterpillar and a butterfly, right? So a caterpillar, does he have the obvious 6 legs and 2 or 3 body segments? No, because he's a larva. He's pretty much the baby stage or the toddler stage of an insect. And those guys, they can be like really little like this. They can be really big and fat like this. You can find them all over the place. You can find them in your backyard. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're orange, sometimes they're fuzzy. There's lots of variety in caterpillars. And those guys will mainly eat leaves and other fibers. So they'll eat leaves and they'll eat plants. Sometimes they'll eat your clothes. That's why you might hear about mothballs. It's not the moths that are eating it, it's the larva. So the caterpillars will eat all those things until they're big and fat and ready to turn into a chrysalis. And they wrap themselves up in a cocoon. And then, like I said, they turn into caterpillar jelly, and their cells reform, and they turn into a butterfly or a moth. And when they're in that adult stage, they no longer eat solid plants. So their mouth totally changes. It turns from something they can eat lots of solid foods to basically just a big long straw called a proboscis. Now the proboscis makes it so they can eat lots of different liquids. And that's pretty much all they eat, is just liquids. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the differences between moths and butterflies, or what you might think are the differences, okay? So let's keep going. We are going to talk now, let's see. Let's talk about the differences between moths and butterflies, okay? So, moths and butterflies do have a couple of differences. I have some moths here to show you. It's just a variety of moths. You might see some like this, maybe in your backyard or up in the mountains when you're camping. You might see moths like this. There's these little white and brown guys. These probably look pretty familiar to you. And one of the ways that moths are different from butterflies is the way that their wings fold. So all of our moths and butterflies that we have mounted in these boxes here are going to show with their wings fully open, so that we can see all the beautiful colors and everything, because when they're folded, you can't always see it. So this is what they look like when they're open. But when you have a butterfly, when it lands on a leaf or a flower, when it lands, its wings fold up, like that. And a moth, when it lands, its wings fold down, like that. So, if you see something in your backyard, then you can see if its wings fold up, it's a butterfly. If its wings fold down, it's a moth. Now we have another question from Emily, or from Kaladin. He says, do moths like to cuddle? Now, that's a great question. Lots of animals don't really like to cuddle because they're not group animals, but I've found in my time, since they are ectothermic, which means that they have to heat themselves from the outside, sometimes when you're out camping in the mountains, you might find a really big moth, ones that are like this big. You might find them and they're trying to warm up, so they'll be sitting in the sunshine, and since they're so cold, if you're really gentle, you can pick them up and you can heat them up with your body heat as you hold them, and they love that because then they get nice and warm, and then when they're warm enough, they fly away. So, do they like to cuddle? Not really, but can you help a moth warm up? You probably can. Okay, now another difference between moths and butterflies is actually their antenna. You can see these little antennae that we have here. They look a little bit different in real life. So let me show you, let's see, these ones right here. Now, moths have very different antennae than butterflies. I'm going to show you. This is a moth. This is an atlas moth. These things are huge. Here's my hand for perspective. It's about as big as my hand. Do you see right there? Those antennae, they're super wide and fuzzy. So they have really fuzzy, hairy antennae. Now butterflies, you can see pretty well on this one right here. Does it have fuzz on its antenna? No, it's got these little bulbous ends here. So butterflies are slightly different in that they have those little balls on the end of their antenna instead of all these little hairs, like this big moth right here. All right. Now, let's see. You might have thought of a few things that you think are different between moths and butterflies that you thought were different, but are actually not necessarily true. It kind of depends on the species. So one of those things is you might have thought, well, butterflies are big and colorful, and moths, well, they're kind of brownish or whitish. Like they don't really come in a lot of different colors, right? Well, I already showed you some brown moths and I showed you some blue butterflies, but I have here a green one. So let's take a closer look. This is called a Luna moth. So even though it's this pretty green color and it has these beautiful little swallowtail ends right here, those right there, it looks like it could be a butterfly just based on the color. But this right here, look at its antennas. Do they have a ball on the end or are they fuzzy? They're fuzzy, right? So this right here is a moth. And these guys are active during the day. So that's another thing. You guys might have thought, well, moths are awake at night. They're nocturnal. And butterflies are awake during the day. They're diurnal. But these right here are awake during the day, and you can see moths and butterflies all the time. So it just kind of depends on the species, whether they're nocturnal or diurnal, or whether they're colorful or not. Now we have a question from Anne asking if we know about that caterpillar book. I'm guessing you mean The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and yes, I love that book. It is an excellent book that talks about metamorphosis. So if you want to read about metamorphosis in a fun way, The Very Hungry Caterpillar is a great one. If you want to read about it in a more informational way, you can look online for all kinds of articles. Now here I have some butterflies that I was going to show you. Are these guys super colorful? Are they blue and green and orange? Not really, no. These guys are brown and yellow and white. So just because it's a moth or a butterfly and you can tell it's a butterfly because of those ends, it's not fuzzy, it's a little bit bulbous there. So you can tell these are butterflies, not moths. Now, all right, let's pull out this one again. One other thing about moths and butterflies is you may have thought, well, maybe they eat different things. You know, maybe moths, you thought maybe moths eat clothes because you maybe heard of like, oh, you got moth holes or mothballs or things like that. And you're welcome, Penny, for answering your question. I'm very happy to answer anyone's questions who comment down below. So you might think like, well, moths and butterflies, you know, they eat different things and that's how they're different. But not really. Like I said before, once they go through metamorphosis, when they're larvae, they eat solid foods. But once they become an adult, they eat liquids. Now you can't really see it on any of our mounts, unfortunately, but right here by their head is where their mouth is, their proboscis. Big long tongue that curls up into a little curly Q right in front of their mouth, and they can extend it and they can put it down into flowers and drink nectar. Can you guys think of any other animals or insects that drink nectar? Comment down below if you can think of any, and I'll say what they are in just a minute. But go ahead and comment if you can think of any nectar-eating animals or insects. Now, it's not just nectar that they eat, though, either. A lot of them will do something called puddling, which is a pretty cute little word, for basically they can only drink liquids, so they'll find different puddles or different forms of liquid to eat. So sometimes that means that they'll find a nice, juicy, muddy puddle and they'll drink out of it because it has lots of different nutrients in it that they can't get from other things. Sometimes it means that they'll find some rotten fruit and they'll drink off the delicious sugariness off the rotten fruit. Sometimes it means that they'll find something like dung or animal droppings and they'll slurp off any of the nutrients they can get from that. So sometimes it isn't necessarily nectar that they eat. Sometimes it's anything liquidy that could give them different nutrients. So sometimes it's kind of gross. When we think about butterflies, we usually think about them eating nice little nectar flowers and things like that. But sometimes it's mud puddles or dung or rotten fruit, which is kind of gross to us. The question from Teddy is, can all animals drink nectar? That's an awesome question, Teddy. Now, lots of animals can drink nectar, like we've got hummingbirds eat nectar. Good job. So hummingbirds, also bees will eat nectar. They also have a tongue or a straw-like tongue that they can stick way down into the flower and slurp up all the delicious nectar, and that's how hummingbirds do it and how butterflies and moths do it. Now, other animals can eat nectar, but if you don't have the really long, thin, tiny straw-like tongue, it makes it so it's really hard to drink the nectar without completely destroying the flower. So as humans, if you've ever seen a honeysuckle flower, I know I used to do this when I was a kid, you pluck the flower off and you can suck on the end and you get just the teeniest bit of nectar and it tastes so nice and honey-like, which is why they're called honeysuckles. But to do that, you have to pick the flower. Now, most animals, they need a sustainable way to eat. So if they regularly eat nectar, they most likely have evolved to have some way of drinking it without destroying the flower, because then the flower can continue to produce nectar and they can come back to eat it at different times. So other animals can drink nectar, but it's not as simple as with a hummingbird or a bee or a butterfly. Now I want to go back for just a second to our moths. These guys right here, I forgot to bring him out, but we have a very important moth that lives here in Utah called the Sphinx Moth. Those are found in the desert. They're pretty big. They're about this big compared to these other moths here, and they drink nectar, but most importantly, they're also pollinators. Now you guys usually will think of pollinators as bees. Bees will go around and they'll drink nectar and they'll collect pollen and then they'll bring pollen to another plant and the pollen breeds between the two plants and it brings fruit. But in the desert, it's really hard for bees to survive. So the Sphinx moth goes around drinking the nectar from the different plants during the night and spreading the pollen just like a bee. So sometimes moths and butterflies can be really important pollinators as well. Now, I'm going to show you guys these butterflies one more time because these are so cool. And I don't know about you guys, but I love seeing butterflies in my backyard or moths in my yard. They're so cool and they're so pretty and they're fun to watch. And there are some ways that you can attract moths and butterflies to your yard. So right now, a lot of insects are in their larval stage. They're going to be caterpillars, just like we sometimes see. They might be green or fuzzy, like I said. And you're going to see those caterpillars sometimes in your yard, but you also might see some butterflies. So if you want to attract butterflies and moths, a really easy way, you can look up a couple different ways online, but a couple ways that I found is you can put out some fruit for them, especially if you hang it in a tree from like a tray or something like that. That keeps ants from getting to it first, and the butterflies will come and usually like oranges. They love oranges, and they'll drink the nectar, the juice off the oranges. You can also you can make some sugar water. You stir the sugar into the water, and then you put a sponge in it. The sponge soaks up all the sugar water, and you can hang that from a tree too, and they'll come and land on that. So if you come up with any ways to see some cool butterflies or moths, make sure to take some pictures or make some observations. You can be a backyard scientist that way. There's lots of different apps and websites where you can report different sightings of different moths and butterflies that you see. So make sure to check that out. We have one last question. Have you been to the butterfly biome at Thanksgiving Point? I personally have not, but I've heard it's really, really cool and that you get to see so many different butterflies. They say, I like it because you get to see a bunch of colorful ones and they have paper to see which one it is. So then they can help you identify the butterflies, which is super cool. That is all for our program today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's been a real delight talking about moths and butterflies with you guys, especially with our big butterfly wall here. So if you have any more questions, if you're watching this in the future, or if you have questions that I didn't get to, go ahead and comment them down below and we'll get to those questions from here on out. And we will see you guys around next week. Bye!